Well, it looks like things were speeded up a little here in the last week or so with a lot of different paperwork coming in, and it looks like it'll be a busy afternoon for me. I'll be doing some copying and doing whatever I can to get things going on my end. But for a lot of you out there, and I know that there's, from looking at the chats in there on my channel, a lot of you are having some fun trying to pick me apart, which is fine. You know, you kind of expect that when you're into any type of a controversial situation, which seems to be going on yet in this neighbor dispute from Otter Creek. And I understand how some of you can get in this thing because you're interested in one side or the other by what you've been told or what you truly believe, and some of you are in it just for the fun of it. It tickles a certain part of you, and I truly hope it's not the part that makes you always want to be on the attack, going after somebody and utilizing unfair tactics, trying to use derogatory names or putting words in people's mouth and stuff like that. That's not a good way to express your opinion. And some of you should really dig deep to see where your opinion came from. And, when I started looking at this whole situation back, it's been over a year now, I believe, and I did go back and look at some of the old videos, and I could see where what I was thinking was slowly changing into a completely different venue, if you will. And when I started out, it's like the squeaky wheel. The one that made the most noise is the one that got the attention and got the lubrication. And I'm sorry to say that I was influenced by the louder voice or whatever I seen there. And some of it you look at who's drawing the crowd, because it'll bring you in. The bigger the crowd, the quicker you seem to come to it. And then you try to listen to the speaker, but you can't listen to the speaker for the noise of the crowd. And I'm beginning to think that a lot of this is that way as well. And I know you guys say, oh, Ray, you're always using some kind of an example to show something else and we don't understand it. I'll do my best, okay? The reason I say that is the crowd be in the comments, and they get going without justification in there, because it's so easy to verbalize something that isn't true when you're on a keyboard and you're hiding behind this thing. I can see me in here, and you can see me. But you see, while I'm talking, I can't see you. Yeah. Anyway, what that shows is that you can throw things at me and I don't know it's coming, not until it's too late. And, when I did do a few lives out there, and I enjoyed them because a lot of people could participate and you got immediate results. But also, what it brought about, and I didn't particularly care for, was some internal fighting. And some of them were friends, and I hated to see that. I didn't want to be a part of seeing friends that before they knew me, they were friends. But all of a sudden they're on my show and they get into an argument and they're mad at each other. And that makes me feel bad because, like I say, I don't want to be a party to that kind of stuff. So I can get on here and I can express my views without being interrupted or corrected, immediately to stop the conversation. In other words, I get my way for a little bit. And then I go down through the comments and I look at them and I try to acknowledge them if I can. In a way, it's a little selfish, I suppose. But on the other hand, I guess it was one of the best ways for me to express myself is to do it this way, where I don't have to worry about somebody stopping me in mid-sentence and then go back to that and try to remember what I said. After all, at my age, you start losing some of your immediate memory. In other words, somebody stops you from doing something and you have to think back, what was I going to do before they stopped me? I laugh about it because it's easier to see when you're on the outside looking in. In other words, other people see it, and I may not see it at that moment and act the fool or the part of the fool. And I don't want to do that too much. So that's one of the reasons. Now, that doesn't mean that I won't someday or in the near future have some lives. It's just that it's hard to have them without explaining to somebody why they can't get in there and beat on somebody else in my channel. And, people, when they get on somebody else's channel, they have to respect what that person is trying to accomplish while they're on there and not take away from it, if you will. If they're going to do anything, they should be able to add something more on a positive note. Okay, now that we're all done with that, I'm going to something else. That's my lecture for the day, okay? So if I upset you and you leave a comment down there, that's fine. I'll try to justify what I said. Now, my last video I put up, I had to remove quite a few, more than normal. And it's a little surprising because I haven't really went out and attacked, per se, somebody's necessarily their character or said anything out there that wasn't already said. In other words, I brought up paperwork that is out there for everybody to see. And being berated for it, all I did was bring up something that, and we're going to use real life here, okay? But Mr. Hales likes to go after people's background or justify how he feels about them because of what they were, or what they happen to be doing at the moment. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't look at people's background, but it doesn't mean that you should use it necessarily to your advantage to cause a problem, okay? And in this instance, the original thing was a dispute between neighbors. And it was neighbors that were initially had got along but no longer do. And I'm talking about Michelle and John. And they're just average people trying to scrape a living with hardly anything to do it with. They're using a lot of elbow grease and doing their very best, okay? And it's kind of like the ways maybe of the pioneers from years ago. You did what you could with what you had. And you thank the good Lord for the tools that you did have. And they profess to be Christian, and I have no reason to doubt them. As far as what they've done in the past, well, that's their past. And have I delved into it? Well, quite frankly, I did look at it. In the very beginning, I spent a lot of time looking at them and not so much Jeremy. Why? I told you earlier on, the squeaky wheel. He had more followers. He was putting out videos on a regular basis, several times a week. And he does have the ability to speak out there. And he's good enough at it that he draws you in for a little bit, but he's not good enough to keep you there. So the tools he uses after that is maybe a threat, similar to some, maybe let's say blackmail or close to it. I mean, when he went after Tina and her husband out there in Otter Creek, he used the threat saying, I have a lot more videos. And he put this on the videotape, okay? In other words, he went on there, and when he first moved into that town, he had talked to the neighbor and got all the local gossip that was going on, the type that embarrasses you. And typical in a small town, people talk. That's what they do. I've lived in a lot of small towns over the years. Neighbors like to come in and talk. They tell you about something the other neighbor did or whatever. And you have to listen to it with a tongue in cheek, because you realize a lot of times people will talk to bring themselves up. And Jeremy has been around long enough. He realizes that if he can get somebody to talk, he can sit back and say very little other than guiding them from time to time. Now, one thing he's good about is guiding other people to say something. Because everybody likes to feel important. Pat on the back, this kind of stuff. And he appropriately will do that in the very beginning until he's got enough ammunition that he doesn't need anymore. Then all of a sudden you don't see him. Because you may not be worthy of his attention at that point. You can't do anything for him. And he knows now that he has enough ammunition that you can't do anything to him. That's smart if a person decides to have a warfare with a neighbor. Now, there isn't any place where you can't go where a neighbor wouldn't have something on you. Nothing that would be really important, but if you say it in a certain way, it'll sound like it is. Now, I've had several people say, hey, I'm going to talk to your neighbors. I'm going to call them up and do whatever. And it's like, hey, have at it. I've been here over 22 years, and my neighbors know me pretty well. And I don't know if anybody could say anything really negative. Nobody's positive all the time, though. So, hey, if you ask the right questions, you'll always get some sort of a negativity report if you want it. It's kind of like looking at a glass that's half full or half empty. I choose to look at that it's more like half full, and I'm happy to have what I've got. And that's life itself. Not everybody feels that way. And if you don't, I feel sorry for you. There's nothing I can probably do to change your mind. Sometimes it's the way you grew up, or sometimes it's the way or the path that you decided to follow. Now, things that I enjoy sometimes is looking back at how it was. But how it was, I may not live long enough to see it to bear fruit again. In other words, even though I had a carefree life when I was young, at that time the parents carried the responsibility of financial stability, food on the table, roof over the head, somebody to come to for advice. And as you get older, all those things are gone, and you are the one giving the advice, and you are the one that's offering the stability and the worries that come with it. Responsibilities is what it's called. Now, if you're a good person and you look out there and you see a wrong out there, and sometimes you'll try to straighten it out. And in the case here, there are quite a few people that want to help Michelle and John out. And then in the course of trying to help them out, they were attacked by a lot of people. And I can attest to the fact, because not only was I attacked by a lot, I can name them. I did. I kept a list of everybody that came on my channel. Not for retaliation purposes, but to keep it from happening again. Because if you attack enough, then I don't want you around me, and therefore I refuse to answer your questions or answers, or I'm just not going to mess around. Now, my grandmother had always told me that everybody has a little good in them, and I believe that to the most point. I've seen people where it was very hard to find. But she said, that doesn't mean you have to bring them home to the table to sit down and eat supper with them. In other words, let them go their way and you go your way. You don't have to be a part of the bad aspect, because the bad part of a person may be so overwhelming that you don't want it to rub off on you. And believe me, if you're around somebody like that, it will. It's kind of like the everyday spoken language. If you're around somebody that's maybe overly educated and they use words that nobody else understands, you go home, you get in the dictionary, and you say, hey, well, that's pretty cute. I'll start using that, and you start doing it. On the other hand, somebody uses a lot of four-letter words or derogatory words in kind. Those words catch on a lot quicker than good things. And I don't know why. But I didn't swear before I went into service, and I learned very quickly how to swear. And the first time I ever swore, I came home on leave after basic training, and I said a four-letter word at the supper table with my grandmother was there, and my three brothers, and my parents. And I was red-faced, and you could hear a pin drop. One word. Because we didn't swear in my house growing up. Now, I learned a valuable lesson immediately, and nobody on the table said anything to me about it. And pretty soon, it went back to normal activity of eating and talking, no arguing or anything like that. And I didn't get too many looks after that as far as, ooh, what did you do? And after supper, my parents didn't say a word about it, and neither did my brothers or my grandmother. They already knew by the shocked look on my face that the good Lord had already tapped me on the shoulder on that one. Now, that didn't stop me from using those kind of words later on, unfortunately. And I got some stories I can tell you about it, things that helped me along the way to slow it down, not necessarily stop it. Like anybody out there, everybody has their inequalities that don't show you in the best of light. And you have to be careful because people will look at you for your worst qualities rather than your better qualities. All right, that's life. People will judge you on that. Now, in this case here, when I looked at between the two neighbors, as time went on, different people kept calling me up, or not calling me, but they would come into my comments, and they would say, you need to look at one thing or another. Now, in defense of Michelle and John, the people who were following her were pretty cordial in what they said. They didn't call me names, and they didn't swear at me. None of them did. Or that I can remember. Now, I'm not. I could go back in my comments and look, but most of it was, Ray, you really just don't know them. You don't know about them. You need to walk in their shoes. You need to understand what they've went through, what they're going through, and what they're trying to accomplish. And I didn't look at any of that. I did not at first. But then there was one person out there that said, well, Ray, you need to look at the other person too. Now, I did look at both sides, and I tried to be on the fence. And I said that in my video, that I would be on the fence. And I caught it from both sides. No matter what I said, it was wrong. And it didn't matter what I said. And I was called out on it. And even Jeremy himself didn't like it that I looked into the background of both sides. Because he didn't really, I don't believe he wanted to be scrutinized in any way. In other words, he did a lot of things out there to make you judge John and Michelle, but he didn't want to be a part of the judgment phase of backfiring on him. And it certainly would when you start looking at, oh, heck, here's a Christian that sues people. And it went on way back and kept going. And as I looked at the different videos and different people talking, I slowly but surely, I started looking more towards the fact that, well, maybe neither one of them were quite correct, because both of them had good or bad qualities as far as from my standpoint when I was looking at it. And some of them said, well, if you think John and Michelle are so good, take them home with you. I kind of laughed at that, and I said, why would I do that? After all, my grandmother told me that you didn't have to bring everybody home. You know, they don't have to sit at your supper table. And more of them said, well, go over there and visit with them. Well, I really had no inclination to do that. I was looking at it as a bystander. And I really didn't want to be so much judgment as just an observer. And if I seen something good or bad, call it out a little bit. No big deal, right? Well, The Bible, sometimes you get to thinking, how does it feel about people that are on the fence? Well, there's this passage somewhere in there buried, and I've looked it up. But you are neither hot nor cold, thou art lukewarm. I spew thee from my mouth. They're talking about people that are on the fence, that talk for both sides. Some will say you're talking out both sides of your mouth, even though you're saying the good and the bad about both parties, but you haven't made a decision maybe about which one is more truthful than the other. When they're both wrong, they're both right. And so it's hard to get that fine line and say, okay, what can I say that makes it where it's not even anymore? I mean, if one is causing it and the other is a reaction, let's go back and look at that. So I did. I went back and I started looking at things again, and I said, this is kind of interesting. One has a lot of followers and money, and their followers are calling me names. The one with the loudest voice and the most money and the most followers had the people with the dirtiest mouth and the things where they wanted me to be not on this earth, quite frankly. And then I started thinking, well, if this is true and those kind of followers are out there, could this be dangerous? And there were some of them that stood out. And they began attacking full force. And even though at the time I hadn't made a decision about who I thought was the better person, they very quickly opened the door telling me, you're not welcome here. And so I looked closer at John and Michelle, quite frankly, and I said, oh, heck. They're after them for what I've already gone through, because I came from a very poor background. We didn't have a bathroom, not in the house. We had an outhouse. We didn't have water in the house, no running water. We had a pump, and we shared it with 2 other homes. My grandfather and a great uncle built that, or dug the well, and they lined it with brick. It was made to last, and had lasted a lot of years. Good cold water. Matter of fact, in the summertime, and we had an ice box, not a refrigerator. For you folks that don't know what an ice box is, it's a box that holds ice, and you put things in that box to keep it cool. That's what an ice box was back then. And I was up there. I can't remember what grade I was in before we got a refrigerator. And a real stove. We had a kerosene stove with a tin box on top that acted as an oven. And 3 rooms. And the kitchen was in whichever room the stove was in, and a dry sink. Okay? Yeah, but I looked at them, and John and Michelle had a lot more than that. So these people are saying, how can you raise a child in the environment that they had? And I looked at that. And I said, well, gee whiz, back when I was growing up, now, yeah, we had some, let's say, garbage. And we would bury quite a bit of it in the garden itself. We would till it down by hand, by the way, no tillers. But and that was on a regular basis. And that included, whatever we had cleaned, an animal when we had hunted it, or fish that we cleaned. That all went back in the ground as fertilizer. And we had a great garden. There was very little things that we had to worry about that had to go to a dump. Tin cans, bottles, for the most part, were recycled if you had enough money to buy something in a bottle, which was rare, but that's the way it happened. We got used to that type of life, and it didn't hurt. I mean, all my brothers grew up fine. My grandmother had lived that life all her life. She was born at the farmhouse, just a quarter of a mile away from where I lived. It was her house that we lived in, but I'm saying where she was born and raised was just a quarter mile away. So when you look back at that, was this so wrong? Because most of the people in the United States at one time or another lived that way. And we moved into a new era where most people, it kind of equalized out, and we all kind of lived on the same plane, and it was called middle class. So if I'm looking back at that, and Is that a reason to be upset with these people because they didn't have as much? I don't know of anything legally where you could go after somebody like that if they're living within the parameters of what life-sustaining things are. And in fact, they'd been turned in multiple times to the CPS, or not CPS, or Child Protective Services, but it's called something else there in Florida. And they were always, they were given a clean bill of health. They were not cited for anything. Now, and that's a matter of record down there. They're not going to tell you what the inspection contained of probably, but they'll probably tell you, hey, there's no problem here between us and them. And that's unusual because if the Child Protective Services starts in on you, a lot of times they don't stop till they've pretty much destroyed your family. And I know they're there to help you, not to hinder you. Now, most of the time they said that John and Michelle had no friends, and yet they did have friends. And how do I know that? Because their friends kept hammering me, telling me, hey, Ray, keep looking, keep looking. Don't give up. You still don't know them. You don't know what they are. You don't know what they're going through. And to this day, I don't know everything they've went through. But I can tell you this. I did not have to go through things like that, where people were after me night and day. Nobody ever tried to take any of us children away from my parents. Nobody tried to take our children away from me. So I didn't undergo what they have, okay? People didn't come on my property and yell at me. People didn't give me the finger when I was going down the road in the car, or at least not where I could see them. We had a fairly close-knit family where we get to see each other on a regular basis, so I guess that was an advantage at that point. But John and Michelle, they have a little daughter they're raising, and it requires a lot of extra time, way more than normal for raising a child, and yet they do it. And so far, according to the doctor that actually put a statement out, written statement, signed, they have done an excellent job. Did everything they were supposed to do. They've kept this child alive through some harrowing times. Yes, she's adopted. As far as I know, adoption is fairly common in our country. And they almost had to beg the woman not to abort this little child before she was born. In other words, they stepped in and said, hey, maybe you don't want this child, but we do. We want to give her a chance, and that's what they've done. And that goes, as soon as I realized what they were going through and what they've done and what they're trying to do, I realized that these people have a good heart. Their intent is good. And the fact that they're trying to move towards better things for themselves, and they have a plan for that child. They're trying to plan a future for her. And they've all had a plan all along for themselves of how to get there. And they're following through on the plan. With all the adversary people that have gotten their way, and everything that's been built in their way, they have been able to get around it, over it, or through it in some way. And they're doing their very best at being self-employed. And people are still trying to destroy that employment. They do not want to see them working, earning money. They don't want to see it. Everything they do, they're told it's illegal. They're breaking the law. And they throw all these things out there so that they're under scrutiny, under the microscope, continuously. And we even seen what happened in one of the videos where the police were there. The dash cam caught Michelle. She was obviously crying, and went to John because of being turned in one more time for something that she had not done anything wrong. She was under harassment, being turned in by Jeremy. And I don't need to go in through all this stuff because most of you have seen the video. And you've seen, I had the paperwork I brought out here, and I really came under attack. When I showed that paperwork, I lost over 300 subscribers from my channel. It was like, screw you, Ray. How dare you show real paperwork? How dare you take their side? In all, the people that left my channel, now there's over 4,000 that left out of 12, 4,000. Now, if I was interested in making money from YouTube, if I had this bad intent, if I was willing to lie and go along with other things, those people would still be there. My channel probably would have grown. But I never intended, when I got into this thing, to grow even one person or to make so much as a nickel. Never was. This was simply a hobby of going out and looking at things. The Christian part says, oh man, these people, they really need help. The things that I seen I didn't like. Number one was I felt that Jeremy, and this is my opinion, obviously, I felt he was a bully. And I didn't know his full personality, had no idea. But more and more of it is coming out on a regular basis. And in the past few weeks or a month, it has come to the light that more and more people are gaining, people that are very intelligent, that know things about these different things, about personality disorders, have come up and give their opinion out there on the internet. One person is actually added to the lawsuit of civil federal lawsuit. They call it lawsuit number 2. And I'm afraid he really shook the cage of a tiger when he did that, because this guy, he's not going to give up. He's a past lawyer, and he's going to fight tooth and nail. And I think the good Lord looked down at this situation, is now seeing that there's some help needed by John and Michelle. And people are starting to gather, very intelligent people. And they're picking up this fight. And yes, it is a fight. It's not just a dispute anymore. This thing has been drug into a court that should have been settled with nothing more than a conversation between the two neighbors. But because of money, ego, and maybe looking for fame, who knows? The opinion, obviously. It has got way past that. And somebody with a lot of influence has decided to use their influence to bury these people. That part breaks your heart when you see this. Now, nobody disputes the fact that Michelle and John, they don't have the ability financially to fight back. All they have is grit. And they have a lot of grit. They have held up to something that most prisoners could not hold up to during World War II and World War I. I know most of you have understood what PTSD is. And, a lot of people in our society suffer from that. And we have found out not too long ago that Jeremy's children actually suffer from PTSD, and most people say, well, that's because of the mother. But the paperwork does not say that. And I wonder how many people out there, what does it take, what kind of proof have you got to have to understand what's going on there? Because just like these protective orders where the local sheriff deputies have found that it's unfounded, the charges that were brought against Michelle and John. And actually, in one of them it says that Jeremy was the aggressor, in their opinion. None of that got to the judge that was in another state going against this protective order and finding them guilty of this thing, and they're still having to go to appear with it with no help from a lawyer at this point. I should say no help. But actually there's things in the background that are going to work for them, and that perhaps maybe they're going to get something that will come out of it that will be good for them. I hope that happens. I pray that it happens. Now, one of the things that's happened along the way is the lawyers that did stand up for him were attacked. The one in Ohio, man, he got out of there as quick as he could. One of them in Florida has some health issues that have stopped him from being adequate in the services that he could provide. One of them, Bruce, I really feel bad for him because his family was attacked, his daughter and his wife. They were doxxed. Everybody learned about where she worked, schedules. There's probably not much they don't know about her that was apparently somehow ended up back in with Jeremy. And Jeremy was quick to let it go out there to over 700,000 followers, and it spread like wildfire. They made it unsafe for this lawyer to continue the practice of standing up for John and Michelle. Now, I know a lot of you right now are already saying, because you told me 100 times, over 100 times, hundreds, that John and Michelle brought it on themselves. They deserved it. Well, no, they didn't bring it on themselves, and no, they don't deserve it. Nobody deserves that treatment. If you were a prisoner, it would be against the law to be treated in the ways that they're being treated. If you were a prisoner in a war. The mental torture is as bad as anything that would be physical. Believe me, it is. When somebody writes a parody song of the angel of death making a visit upon your daughter, is that not mental torture? If you're not told on a daily basis that somebody's coming to grab your daughter, is that not mental torture? How much sleep do you think a person gets at night when every time there's any kind of a noise, they wake up, and now they're worried enough to look outside? What's going on? How many of you, I ask, how many of you could put up with that? I don't care how you try to justify it. You're completely wrong if you think that it's right for anybody to attack a family. I put out a story on here one time where I went after somebody, and the result was the family was starting to suffer over it because financially I had decided to break this guy who was a bad person in my mind. As it ended up, not only did I see through the fallacy of of the things I was doing, it was against my Christian beliefs, and I tried to straighten it out, and we ended up, our families were good friends, up until the man and wife finally passed away. I mean, they were our age. They're gone. And we even traveled and worked in different states together as families. I can't tell you how much friendship and pleasure they brought back into our lives, that we were able to break bread together. And we weren't that way at first. We were him and I were enemies. But we are no longer enemies. They're no longer here, but way before that, we had buried the hatchet and not in each other. People don't need to fight over the little things, whether it's a neighbor dispute or anything else. They need to figure out, how can we be more on the friendly side? Now, when we go after somebody, are we doing it for our ego? What are we trying to gain on it? When are we satisfied when we've evened the score? I'm not telling you to go out there and let somebody roll over the top of you or punch you in the mouth or something. I'm not saying that. Avoid any confrontation if you can. If you can't, obviously you have to protect your family and yourself. But when that's done, you need to go your own way and let them go their way. Now, in a situation like this one, there is no such thing. You cannot go away from this situation. The situation is going to follow you home. Once in this battle, it's there to the finish. During Roman times, there was many battles in the arena where it was man against beast or man against man. And the only survival was the one that was the toughest or had the most tools or could actually fight back. If they chose to stand there, they were no longer going to exist on this earth. People enjoyed that. They gave the thumbs up and thumbs down, just like these channels do. Why do you think there's a thumbs up and a thumbs down? That's way from the Roman times. I mean, think about it, people. God didn't put us on this earth to fight with each other. He actually put us here to enjoy the fruits of his labor. And there are plenty here, and they're all free. Free for you and I to enjoy. And what are we doing? Did we get so bored we had to pick on each other and cause wars and all the things that we shouldn't do? I really feel sorry for all of us because this rabbit hole got into much more than that. It's so big that we're being engulfed, the entire world. It's a 50-50 world. One half is against the other half. We don't have to look for a reason. There's a lot of reasons out there. You know, not long ago I said, look, I was going to do whatever I could to help John and Michelle out because I believe in them that much. That I would rather build than to fight. And I wasn't going to tear them down, and I wasn't interested in tearing Jeremy down either. But you know, the fight was carried to me. And everybody was out, not everybody, but it was decided they wanted to destroy whatever I stand for, what I am. I've been attacked about everything you can possibly be. No matter what age you are, you can be attacked for being too young, too old, not smart enough, too smart. You have too much. You don't have enough. You're not doing it my way, so hit the highway. You know, that's kind of the things that are going on out there. So just for an experiment, try this. Try to be good for a day to everybody. Now, the ones that aren't good to you, slowly push them away. Okay? Pretty soon, all that will be around you are the good people that you want to associate with you. Just slowly but surely. You know, there come a time, this goes back a lot of years ago, I used to like to have more than a few beers. And the thing I had in common with a lot of them were they liked to do the same thing. We all worked in construction, and everybody had kind of a rough edge. But because of the church affiliation, and it was Baptist, by the way, I am Baptist, drinking is not a part of the covenants. Anyway, the drinking had to stop. Magically, almost overnight, almost everybody that liked to come to my house to have a few beers were gone as well. What I found out was that the only thing we had in common was a few drinks. And life was better. And I'm not saying that turned my life around, because it certainly didn't. What turned my life around, quite frankly, was asking Christ to come into my life. And the part of it that really made a difference was I'd ask him to lift the problems from my shoulders, ask for forgiveness of the things I was doing or thinking. In that moment, it was different. And I'm not saying that life was easy, because it wasn't. It didn't give me money. It didn't instantly give me a lot of friends. It gave me an insight to look at what was out there. Not being as necessarily judgmental, but to watch what kind of groups I was involved with. And the same thing with my children. And it was tough on them, I think, for a while too, because all of a sudden, old friends are gone and new people coming in. Kind of the eye of the storm. Because as certainly as you go through the eye of a hurricane, as you become a Christian, all of a sudden Here comes the battering of the winds in the opposite direction. And yeah, you're going to get nailed. But the good Lord is there to help you through it. And that's what I wish for all of you out there. Now, I know this thing has been way too long, and I haven't let anybody disturb or intervene or anything like that because I chose not to take it live. I hope that I got through to a few of you. I understand that I can't stand up to over 700,000. I'm just one person. Most Christians in this day and age are standing up to a lot more than 700,000, believe me. And those of you that think I'm not a Christian, hey, that's fine. Go your way and I'll go my way. You're not going to change my mind about how I feel about myself or my religion or people that believe like I do. The fact that you would rather attack somebody like me, well, you know, I guess we're in a free world where you can do that. If it makes you feel better, I guess it's better for you. But I can tell you, life sucks if that's how you think you have to do. I didn't go after Mr. Hales. What I tried to do was help John and Michelle. And that brought that group, not John and Michelle's group, but Jeremy's group, down on me. Because I dared to dispute the things that he was saying and doing. That's why. My opinions are just that. Thank the good Lord I live in a country where I'm allowed opinions. Now the fact that somebody's going to try to make me pay for that, well, I can't help that. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to change me for that. The Lord brought me to where I'm at today. And when he's had enough of what I'm going on or what I'm doing, he's going to bring me home. I believe that. You know, my son is there waiting for me, one of my sons. And I've got more people waiting for me than the people here on earth that I grew up with. You know, at 80 years old, I'll be 81 here pretty soon. A lot of the people are gone. Thank goodness I have a wife. And my wife's been with me. We've been married over 62 years. And we went together for way over a year before we got married. It's been a wonderful ride. That even with the bumps and stuff that we've went through, because we've had each other, the life has been worth living. And that's why we're here, I think. The Lord thought, hey, the two of you deserve each other. You can live as whatever. I can't think of any other reason. And we're both mobile. We can walk. Not very well, but we can walk. And yes, we spend a lot of time at the doctor's office because the good Lord provided it for us. That's one of the things that our life has had a lot of extensions because of things like that. And when one of us has been sick, the other's been there to help them out. In the last, I'd say 5 years, the hospitalizations and the things we've went through, now we have insurance, and we have Medicare because I paid into it since the 60s, early 60s, when it first was brought about. And we have another insurance policy over and above that to carry other things that Medicare doesn't cover. And if we didn't have it in the last, 5 or 6 years, let's say the last 10 years, it would have been well over $1 million worth of medical things that kept us stable, on our feet, and alive. And now, my wife has had 2 near-death experiences. And I was there both times, and it scared the daylights out of me. One, initially for my wife, and the realization of being alone later on when it hit me, what happened. And I know that That's coming. And the things that keep you alive today are the things that you enjoy. And so I've got to say, the reason I'm alive today is strictly has to do with the marriage. The good Lord put us together for a reason. And, we're still here. We're happy with each other. We're happy with how we got here. We overcome the bumps of life. And I can't help but think and hope that those same things that we enjoyed will happen to John and Michelle. That getting in there and helping them was not a failure. That it actually is going to come around and be right. Now, there's other channels out there, and I know we've had some recent people come. But, when you look at the ones that worked so hard, and, I'm talking about Lisa and Tori on Two Leaves in a Pod. In the last year, they have done more towards helping that family out than any two people I can think of, but not by themselves. They were able to gather people around them. It started out, I said, here's a little channel with big hearts. And I still believe that because there are so few people that could help and helped in a big way. Let's face it, a fence was built. A little girl was able to enjoy a great Christmas. And their house is being finished. And they have more friends than they had before. They had friends, close friends, good friends, that helped them through the rough spots, John and Michelle and their little daughter. I hope the roughest time is over, and I'm hoping that all good things are ahead for them. Please pray that these things that are happening now can come to a gracious end for all concerned. That everybody will end up going their way after this is done and be satisfied with the results. I hold no malice toward any other man. The fact that some men hold malice towards me or women, as far as that goes, that's something they have to live with. I believe in Jesus Christ, and I've asked him to lift as much my shoulders as possible so that I don't have to live every minute worrying about one person or two people or 100,000 people or 1 million if it comes to that. So for all of you out there, go ahead. Get down on your knees and pray to the good Lord and ask for goodness for everybody on this earth, that we can all enjoy a happy life. Well, I don't have a whole lot more to say. I always like to say, I picked this up from John. If nothing else, it is a way of saying goodbye. And I used to use several different languages to say goodbye. That way, people across the world would know what I'm talking about. But I think John has gotten famous enough now with the ta-ta that most of us try to use that. So, John, here's to you, my friend. Ta-ta.